Et bonjour mes élèves, c'est Madame Brown et aujourd'hui on va parler des adjectifs possessifs. C'est la deuxième partie de deux vidéos. This is the second part of two videos on the possessive adjectives en français, of course. Looking again, just to review from the first video, what are possessive adjectives? Possessive adjectives clarify the ownership of an object. So in English, they are my, your, his, her, its, our, and their. So in the first video, we looked at mon, ma, mes, ton, ta, te, son, sa, se. In this video, we're just going to focus on the second half of the chart. So notre, nom, votre, vos, and leur. Notice that leur, they're both pronounced the same, but the second one gets an S at the end. Now, 4 rules don't all apply anymore, but let's just review what they were. The first one, owner agreement. So who owns the object? That determines which group of possessive adjectives you should choose from. The second rule, number agreement. Your possessive adjective must agree, singular or plural, with the noun it modifies. So is the noun, the object that is owned, is that object, singular or plural? The third rule, gender agreement. Doesn't matter with these possessive adjectives. And the fourth rule also doesn't matter with these adjectives. So gender agreement isn't an issue anymore. So our owner agreement, remember, je, we had mon, ma, mes, tu had ton, ta, te, il, elle, and on, you, son, sa, se. For nous, we're going to focus on these at the bottom. We have notre, nom, vous, we have votre, vos, and il and elle plural, we have leur and leurs, but the second one has an S. So we'll just look at this group here, these 3 at the bottom. Rule number 2, number agreement. Remember, the possessive adjective will also vary depending on whether the owned object is singular or plural. So in our singular group, we have mon, ma, ton, ta, son, sa, notre, votre, and leur, sans S, so without an S. And then our plurals were mes, tes, ses, nos, vos, and leurs, avec an S, with an S. Then we had gender agreement, right? Gender agreement only mattered if the owned object was singular and the owner was singular. Now, notice at the bottom, these were crossed out. The reason they were crossed out is because gender agreement doesn't matter to them. So we can ignore all that mess. Then this other rule, right? That one exception, owned feminine singular objects that begin with a vowel or a silent H will use the masculine singular possessive adjective. We don't need to worry about that either. So just ignore that business. Okay, the possessive adjectives for first, second, and third person plural are a bit different because gender doesn't matter. So what is first, second, third person plural? That's nous, vous, and il and elle with an S, right? So remember, vous can also be singular in a formal context, but let's not really worry about that. Even when it's singular, its possessive adjectives don't change. Okay, so again, let's go through the first rule, owner agreement. Who owns the object? We do. So our possessive adjective is our. In French, we have 2 choices, notre or nos. Now, if our object is singular, as in the case of père, father, mère, mother, and ami, friend, we're going to use notre. In the case of it being plural, we use nos, looking at sœur for sisters and frère, brothers. Now, is that singular object feminine or masculine? That's our third rule of gender agreement. It doesn't matter. Gender isn't a factor. So, notre applies to both feminine and masculine objects, and nos applies to both feminine and masculine objects. And then that crazy fourth rule, does a singular feminine object begin with a vowel or a silent H? No, it doesn't matter. So, both rules in 3 do not apply with the plural possessive adjective forms. The only factor that matters is whether the owned object is singular or plural. Okay, let's look at the second group, owner agreement. Who owns the object? You do. Now remember, vous can be singular, formal, but it can also be plural, as in y'all. So those are y'all's dogs, they ain't my dogs. All right, your. We have votre for singular objects, and we have vos for plural objects. And then looking at their. So who owns the object? They do. Those are their dogs. Again, we have leur for singular without an S and leurs with an S for plural objects. All right, pratiquer, time to practice. Look at these nouns in the table and decide based on the criteria which possessive adjective they would use. So in the first video, we had this really big, daunting table, but we had these 3 columns. We don't have to worry about those anymore, right? So we can take those columns out and shorten up our table. So can you figure out which possessive adjective to use for these nouns? On the left, let's look at oncle, uncle. Who owns the uncle? Nous, we. He is our uncle. So how do we say our uncle? For nous, we look at notre or nos. Because it's singular, we can only use notre. So we have notre oncle, our uncle. Then for tante, the owner is vous. Our choices are votre or vos. Because it's singular, we use votre, votre tante, your aunt. And then ami, the owner is il, as in they. Possessive adjectives we can use are leur and leurs avec an S. So we use leur without an S because it's a singular object. So we have leur ami, their friend or their girlfriend. Cousins. Cousins is plural. Cousine, we have an E there because it's feminine. Who is the owner? Nous, so they are our cousins. Our choices are notre or nos. Because it's plural, we use nos, N-O-S, nos cousines, our cousins. For sœur, we're looking at vous. Our possessive adjectives are votre and vos. Because it's plural, we're going to use vos. So we have vos sœurs, your sisters. Now remember, the S's don't get pronounced on vos and nos unless they're followed by a vowel. All right, looking at the last one, enfant, children. Remember, enfant can be a mixed group of boys and girls, but we default to the masculine when it's a mixed group. Okay, who is the owner? They. So they, we're looking at their. How do we say their in French? Leurs. Because it's plural, we use leur avec an S. So we have leurs enfants. Normally we don't say the S, but because it's followed by a vowel, we can make a liaison there between leur and enfant. But remember, it makes a Z sound. Leurs enfants. Their children. And that is it for possessive adjectives. I hope you've learned a little something there that you didn't know before. Bonne chance et à la prochaine. Au revoir.